GramacTalks. Be the light that guides, the courage that explores.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to GramacTalks. Today I want to talk about something that every single one of us needs, regardless of our age, background, or abilities. And that is it. Community, or as I like to put it, finding your squad. Life was never meant to be lived alone. Whether you're a student to find your place on campus, someone navigating a disability, or simply going through a difficult situation, having people around you who encourage you, laugh with you, and walk beside you makes all the difference. And last week, I was reminded of just how special that can be. So recently, I had the opportunity to attend a Lord of the Rings guys night at a friend's house. And if you know me, I'm a pretty big Tolkien fan. Although I personally prefer Lewis, but regardless, I was excited from the moment that my church pastor thought about it, and he's actually, I'd say he's a bigger Lord of the Rings fan than I am. But what really impressed me most when I went there, was the effort that he and another pastor made. I was expecting a regular guy's night, with movie, but they each really went out of the way. I remember I went with my cloak, and he actually went all outfitted out with cloak, daggers, and really just as much as you'd expect from a Lord of the Rings fan. And they really outdid themselves, both in their welcome and really how they got everything together. I was amazed. But I remember that there were, he actually brought a Hobbit background so we could take pictures mid-movie, because obviously, the Fellowship of the Ring was pretty long, but we got to take pictures, and it was fun, but really and he actually got each of the guys' mugs to enjoy the film. And really, the other pastor made some really good food as well. I mean, the attention, that both pastors made for the guys was really outdone, and they really outdid themselves. But what I'll never forget is when the pastor and his because I have like script on the side, so don't mind me if I'm scrolling But one moment I'll never forget was when the pastor and both his sons actually surprised me with a handcrafted sword that they had forged themselves. I remember it was on the display with the other swords, so I thought, maybe it's a prop he brought in. Well, he gave it to me as a gift, and thanked me for helping out my pastor with my group, and I said I would do it gladly, because that's what community does. We help each other out, we build each other up, and my friend actually got to try it out. We sliced open the watermelon, and I gave the sword the name Slice, because it can really slice through just about anything with one swing. And honestly, I think that's one of the coolest gifts I've ever received, and I even remember my other pastor said, it's pretty funny. He was like, I wonder what gift Fawzi has that everybody wants to get themselves out of the sentence. And I thought it was, pretty funny. But the greatest gift really wasn't something I could hold physically, but rather it's a sense of belonging. For a few hours, and no one cared that, of what we look like or what we've gone through a week, And I felt like simply one of the guys, whether that was sharing stories with them, laughing and eating and just enjoying the overall fellowship. And that's something every person longs for. And looking back, I don't think it was the theme itself that made that night stick with me, but rather it was that we built something together, a shared memory that none of us really will ever forget. And I think that years from now, somebody, whether it be me or someone else, will probably bring up the time that Ethan sliced over the watermelon, and I almost sliced a couple of members. I'm kidding. But no, that's usually how real friendships take root. Or better yet, that's how real fellowships take root. It's not necessarily from small talk across the table, but doing something together. Whether that be an adventure or a meal shared with friends. It could be an inside joke that only makes sense if you were there. Like if we were taking the Hobbit's Isengard. And these shared experiences ultimately become shared history. And shared history is what real friendships grow out of. J.R.R. Tolkien understood this better than anyone. The Lord of the Rings overall isn't really about a magical ring. Rather, it's about fellowship. If you think about it, Frodo couldn't carry the burden alone. He had Sam. Aragorn had Legolas and Gimli. You see, even the greatest heroes need companions for the journey. And of course this brings back a meme. A friend said to me that, here's something along the lines of, it said that you think friends are weak, and then it showed a picture of Aragorn and the fellowship, and the meme was that, so you're calling Aragorn son of Aragorn weak. And I'm sure this episode will have plenty of Lord of the Rings references, and Sophie and I are Lord of the Rings fan. And I'm sorry, you should look it up though. You should give it a read. I definitely recommend. But, overall, if you really think about it, Gandalf, who's portrayed as this wise character, still needed the fellowship around him. Aragorn, who's a king in waiting, still leaned on his companions and on the counsel of others. And who could forget about Frodo Baggins? He's small and unremarkable by every worldly measure. However, he would have never reached Mount Doom without Sam at his side the entire way. Even if legendary heroes with rings of power and swords forged by elves needed people beside them, maybe that tells us something about the rest of us. One of my favorite quotes from the movie comes from Samwise Gamgee, and it says, "There's something good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." And I think that quote reminds us that one of the greatest goods in this world is the people that God places beside us. And really, that's what discipleship is for. God isn't just going to church on Sundays, but it's also discipleship. It's actively living the Word. It's fellowship with like-minded people if you're religious. Now, if you're not religious, I recommend that you find people that you find your tribe, your community, or find people that share the same shared interests as you do. And interestingly, psychology agrees. You see, research consistently, I think I activated Siri by mistake. But research consistently shows that people with strong friendships and supportive communities tend to experience low levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. and they often recover more quickly from difficult seasons, enjoy better physical health, and even tend to live longer. Psychologists sometimes call this our sense of belongingness, and they treat it as one of our most basic human needs, right alongside food, safety, and rest. They say we're built for connection. See, we're built for connection. Not as a bonus feature, but as something closer to an essential wiring. And if you see me at pause from time to time, sometimes the AI on my phone accidentally activates, so I don't mind that. But back to the topic. There's a reason connected people tend to bounce back faster from hard seasons. And it's not that their struggles are smaller. It's not that they're carrying them in isolation. But there's someone to call. There's someone who shows up with a meal or a text or just their presence. I remember my 93-year-old neighbor once told me, he says, Fawzi, you inspire people with just being there. And I thought about that phrase for so long. I mean, to my eyes, I always thought, inspiring people meant, giving them a word of encouragement, maybe giving a lengthy speech. But I think it touched my heart deeply when you said that just being there, inspires him. She also made me so I guess sponsored scholars right after all. I don't know why people like giving me swords, but apparently they do. And if you give me one, you might see it on the wall. I'm playing. But, see, it works both directions. Support isn't only for hard days. It's also for the good ones. Maybe there's a win that nobody's around to hear. And the win feels smaller. Sometimes there's a milestone with no one to celebrate. And it feels quieter than it should. Like, I know I recently released a book, and honestly I didn't think I'd be really celebrating with it because, it's, in my mind, it's, it's no biggie. And then my friend surprised me with the Lord of the Rings on the same day, so it's like I got to celebrate my book launch with my friends, and even got to serve Brad Sword along the way. And I'll make sure to show it to you guys on the wall once it comes up. But the main thing is that, you need to have people that are willing to celebrate your success. Surround people that don't envy you, but rather they lift you up. Yeah, it could be a small win. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be that you're having a good day today, or maybe that you did one step, different than you never gonna be doing. I think it's far more important celebrating the small wins, because celebrating the small wins keeps us, I think, grateful. And then when the big wins come, yeah, celebrate it, yes. Enjoy it. But always remember where you started. And oftentimes people, have people to lean on during hardships. Because trust me, it makes an incredible difference. And no one deserves to go through life alone. They say we weren't created to carry every burden by ourselves. Sometimes all it takes is one conversation, one shared meal, or one loyal friend to remind us that you're not alone. And if you don't have friends, be that friend. If you're not Frodo, be the Sam to others. Or be the short ground to others Indiana Jones. And if you don't get that pop culture reference, I'm sorry. But important, if you don't have someone, be someone to people, because I think we all have our burdens, and it's easier if we carry them with others instead of having to carry them alone. And psychologically, that actually benefits us because we release that burden, we release that stress, and you end up feeling a lot better in the long run. And as someone living with CP, I know how easy it can be to feel isolated. I love where I work. I love this office because I get to do a lot of things here. And sometimes physical barriers become social barriers. And sometimes people don't know how to approach someone with a disability. And sometimes we hesitate to reach out ourselves, I'll be honest with you. I've rolled into plenty of rooms, unsure whether I'd really be included. And, surprisingly, everywhere I've gone, people see me, and it's true, like my neighbor said, they're inspired by me. And, I'm not saying you have to do something big, or, you might have a different story than mine. You might not. But, the truth of the matter is, I think, we live in a society that is far too accustomed with quote-unquote independence. And I say that because even though we have quote-unquote independence, studies show that we are the most isolated generation. I mean, if you think about it, we're on our phones, almost every day. When was the last time we actually, socialized and talked to our neighbors, our siblings, our parents? That's why I try to go outside after I read a Quran. And, I have a nice talks with my neighbor. And, I think partially that because I know that, he's going to get older and I don't know how long he'll be with us. So I try to cherish every moment I have with him. And of course share my faith when possible. But all of this, it starts by simply showing up. Whether that's joining a group, starting a conversation, accepting an invite, and taking that first step. You may discover that friendships last a lifetime. Some friendships. Not all friendships last. But the true ones stay within our hearts. And, it's worth giving it a shot. And, some people might, some of the listeners might be thinking, okay, it's fine for you, but I'm not really a people person, or I don't know how to make friends, or I've tried before and it just didn't click. And look, I get it, So here are a few things that have helped me. Start smaller than you think you need to. You don't have to walk into a room and leave with 10 new friends, quote-unquote friends. Sometimes all it takes is one conversation. And of course, after that conversation, maybe follow up on the friendship. Maybe once a week. Friendship is a two-way street, and if they don't respond to him with you, just, don't take it personal. I learned that the hard way to not take any friendships personal, no matter if it's your best friend, or else you will get hurt in the long run. I encourage you to look for groups built around something that you already love. It's easier to connect over a shared interest than to force a friendship out of nothing. And that could be a Bible study or a book club, maybe a hiking group, an intramural team. It could also be a volunteer project, whatever that may look like for you. Everybody's different. But my point is, you have to be willing to sit with a little awkwardness. Almost every meaningful friendship sometimes starts out slightly clumsy. And that's normal. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't work out. But, if it doesn't work out, give it more than one shot. Edison had, I think, 1,000 tries before he succeeded the light bulb. And likewise, community rarely clicks the first time. So, if you fall down, if a friendship doesn't work, go back a second time, a third time. What matters is that you don't stay down, but you get back up and you continue pursuing. And that doesn't mean being needy or being, people needy. It means you're actively doing something. You're actively pursuing something. And it takes time to be friendships. Friendships can come when you're working and you might not be pursuing it at the moment. And familiarity is usually what turns a room of strangers into a club of friends. So today, I'd like to leave you with a challenge. Find your tribe. Like I said, it could be a Bible study, it could be a club on campus, or a live group. It could be a sports team, or a book club. And for you gamers out there, I know there's a lot of streams and, Twitch, and I can't think of the name of the app right now. I know it might come to me, it might not. Discord. There you go. You could find a Discord chat. But the point is, don't spend your entire life on the sidelines. I encourage you to take the initiative. Introduce yourself. Ask questions. Share a meal. Laugh together. Because somewhere out there are people who will encourage you, who will challenge you, and they'll remind you that you don't have to walk through life alone. But here's the other half of the challenge that I think matters even more, Don't just look for your tribe. Be someone's tribe. And the same thing could go for relationships, Don't look for the right person or the right spouse, Be the person who you would like to maybe date someday or marry someday. And naturally, that person will find you or you'll find them. And it can be in school or at your workplace. You can notice the person sitting alone. And you'll be the first, try to be the first one to speak to them. Maybe send a text message to someone that you haven't talked to in years. Be the friend who shows up with a meal, who remembers someone's hard week, who forges the equivalent of a handcrafted sword for someone else. Some gesture that says, I see you and you belong here. Because someone out there is someone who feels exactly the way you've felt before. They might feel overlooked or uncertain, and they might be wondering if they'd be welcome. And you might be the green door they need to walk through. Just like the Fellowship of the Ring. Life's greatest adventures are rarely solo journeys. They're shared with others. So go find your squad. And while you're at it, become the kind of friend worth finding. This has been GramacTalks, and remember, be the light that guides, the courage that explores, and the faith that endures.